My folks in Oklahoma are still overwhelmingly supportive of the president. We'll see over the course of the coming hours or days what kind of response we get from our trading partners or competitors around the world. But what choice do we have other than to pursue this for the time being and hold the faith when it comes to the market?
Well, being supportive of the president is one thing, Congressman. Being supportive of this specific policy from the president is another. Are your constituents telling you they're on board with tariffs of this scope and scale?
My constituents are holding their breath. 80% of the cotton we raise in this country plus is exported. 40% of the winter wheat we raise in this country is exported. All the hogs we raise in Northwest Oklahoma get on ships to go to Asia. So these issues are very important to my constituents, but they also understand the status quo for the last 3 or 4 decades has worked against us. And here comes President Trump, prepared not to accept the status quo, but to plow through. Now, we will see over the coming days and weeks and months. I have faith that the president and his inner circle of advisors will make the necessary strategic adjustments if there are strategic adjustments to be made. But let's just take a breath and try to work our way through the next few days. Because after all, if you put the money in the market 2 years ago, from a stock market perspective, you're still several thousand points ahead as of this moment.
Well, to the point that you're making about your district, Congressman, a report by the U.S.-China Business Council found indeed that Oklahoma's 3rd district was the 3rd largest recipient. China, rather, was the 3rd largest recipient of your global exports, which you just described here, $154 million in gross sales. How do you quantify what's about to happen here to local business?
Well, if you look at 4 years ago, when we had the first taste of the trade wars, President Trump responded by urging Congress to provide additional assistance to farmers to weather the storm. And he also negotiated a deal 4 years ago with the Chinese to buy an additional $50 billion in U.S. agricultural products. I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head how well the Biden administration followed through on that, but he remembered who his supporters were and he stood with us. We'll see this time, but you have to have faith. We'll see in the next hours, days, weeks what happens. But movement, it would seem, from our trading partners around the world, might, the president says he's had inquiries from 50 different countries wanting to address the tariff issues. Again, this is a sledgehammer approach, but the system has generally worked against us from a manufacturing point of view for decades. Let's give it a try.
Congressman, one of your Republican colleagues in the House, Congressman Don Bacon, has introduced legislation that looks a lot like the legislation, bipartisan legislation that was introduced in the Senate, essentially requiring congressional approval of the president's tariffs. The White House today has issued a veto threat on that Senate bill that was co-sponsored by Senators Chuck Grassley and Maria Cantwell. Why veto something that is actually technically, according to the Constitution, just you guys reclaiming Article 1 authority that you're entitled to?
Well, I'm very jealous of congressional power under the Constitution. I'm not sure how we got to this point of delegating this much to the president. It is a discussion that has to be had. I'm not sure that right now, in the depths of the trenches, economically, is the battle is the place and time to do it.
Just want to mention a breaking headline here on the terminal, Congressman. It appears that President Trump's news conference that had been scheduled for a couple of hours from now with Benjamin Netanyahu has been canceled. They are going to take some questions, I want to be clear, when they meet in the Oval Office, but we're not going to have the formal bilateral news conference that we had expected. Congressman, that's just part of the story today that we're following with regard to these tariffs. And as Kayleigh mentioned, now you've got essentially a veto threat coming from the White House here. Do you worry? Is your worst case scenario a war between the White House and the Congress on top of a trade war?
I would tell you, Joe, my biggest concern just this moment, in addition to tariffs, in addition to trade wars, the House needs to pass the budget resolution that the Senate has passed with our separate instructions so that we can get on with reconciliation, addressing the national debt, addressing spending, making sure that we don't have the most dramatic increase in taxes at the end of this year and the effect that that would have on the entire economy. There are a lot of pieces in play right just this moment. We need to focus.
Well, of course, one of your focuses, sir, is you chair the new task force on monetary policy, treasury market resilience, and economic prosperity. And given how keyed in the market seems to be to the words of Federal Reserve officials around this, I wonder if you are anticipating we may see intervention from the central bank. Because right now, at least in terms of market functioning, everything looks like it is acting appropriately. The systems are working. And short of that, is there really a need for Fed intervention here that you see?
Well, I have faith in Chairman Powell and the entire Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. I think they, using that the spirit of the 1913 Act, will make the appropriate decisions on interest rates, in effect, monetary policy. We'll just have to see over the course of the days. This is a world where we seem to live moment by moment, not day by day traditionally, but we'll see where they go. And by the way, on the task force, our next hearing this week will address U.S. Treasury debt in the monetary system. How do you market, how do you sell all of the Treasury notes, bonds, and bills into the market when you have 7, 8 times more paper than we had 20 or 30 years ago, and you have half the market makers? This will be an introduction to an introductory meeting so that the members of the task force can come up with speed with experts in the field. But yeah, you talk about timing of critical nature, a task force focusing on the Fed and Treasury debt. I can't imagine two more important issues for the long-term and intermediate and short-term future of the country than that.
Well, when we think about the short term, Larry Fink was talking to Bloomberg last hour. You might have heard the conversation, Congressman. He's casting doubt on what the market sees as the likelihood of several, maybe 4 interest rate cuts this year, even though he says we're probably in a recession right now. If that's the case, how about an emergency rate cut today?
That's not really a position for me to take a side on, but I will simply say this. A lot of the challenges we face right now have to do with the Biden administration's overstimulating the economy with spending 4 years ago, and we're dealing with a hangover from that. Balancing where we are, interest rates, capital investment, the trade issues, it's a challenging time. I would not want to be the chairman of the Fed or, for that matter, on the board of directors. And we can all offer advice and independence, but it's still a body based on its own insights that makes the decision.
Well, if you don't want to be the Fed chairman, Congressman, I wonder if you envy the speaker this week as well, because he's going to have to push through the Senate resolution, which you were speaking to just a moment ago, that looks different than what you and your colleagues initially passed in the House. And already there are a number of Republicans who have suggested they can't support this, given how drastic the difference is in terms of the spending cuts that are outlined. Are you confident that you actually can get this thing passed before the Easter recess?
Well, let me put it this way. With the challenges going on right now, whether it's the trade wars, the stock markets, all of the bond markets, all of these issues, we in the House Republican Conference have to show forward momentum. We have to demonstrate that we can get our work done. We can get to reconciliation. No matter what the instructions say, it will be that final document put together by the various committees that create the savings that move the process forward. If we can't take that step, then that is the kind of thing that could potentially have a dramatic psychological effect on the market. I've told several of my colleagues, we need to do our work and do it on time this week. We cannot go home for Easter until we've addressed the budget resolution. And if we don't do our work, the market may explain to my colleagues why we have to do our budget and reconciliation work.